Agile methods are dangerous. That's what I'm here to talk about today. My name is Julian HOLMES from ThoughtWorks, as has been said. So just briefly, who are ThoughtWorks? Well known around the world in what we do in software delivery, famous for Agile. We've got a number of famous people work for us, such as Martin Fowler. Primarily as an organization, we're a software delivery company. 95% of what we do is deliver software for companies, quick, with fast feedback loops, and make sure people really get the value they need. The other 5% are like me. They help other companies become like ThoughtWorks, actually be able to deliver effectively. So my presentation today is about some of the things I've experienced and seen in organizations when I'm trying to help them improve. So let's just be clear. Agile methods do give value. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying they're dangerous. And they can cause lots of problems in an organization because people misinterpret what's really supposed to happen. So I've got a few quotes for you that we'll go through. And you might recognize some of these conversations, hopefully not as often as I do, but hopefully you'll recognize them and you'll be able to understand what I'm trying to talk about. So there are a lot of dangers out there. People say these things not because they want to do damage to their companies and organizations, it's just they don't really get it yet. And so I'm going to try and explain why they're wrong in some of these things they say. I'm also going to try and give you some ideas about how to try and change that conversation. People need to be able to talk about this and understand this the right way. So how do you change that conversation? And hopefully some of the things I suggest will be common sense to you. But I'm sure you're all aware of the quote from Voltaire that common sense is unfortunately not as common as we'd like it to be. So let's see how we go. So here's some of these common dangers. I say you can probably hear these everywhere, but let's start with the first one. This person, the scrumdamentalist, okay, they've read the book, they've been on the course, they're absolutely dedicated to the cause, but unfortunately, it's kind of exactly what the method says is what they believe you have to do at all times. So how do we address? I'm sure you've all come across some of these. They've been on the 2-day training course. They're now the master of everything. Yeah. So it's about managing this dogma, this kind of almost religious belief that if you just completely accept everything that's been said in the method, it will just work. That's not always the case. I'm sure you've seen it, a little bit of this dogmatic approach of, well, we meet every day for 15 minutes, hence we are now agile. It doesn't work like that. Just doing things. It's often referred to as being something like a cargo cult. I don't know if you've ever seen those pictures of people in the South Pacific Islands that after the Second World War built wooden aeroplanes and cleared runways because they thought if they recreate what happened during the war, all those good things of alcohol and sweets and food will arrive. No, just by having those things in place does not mean you will get the good things. So we need to make sure that we're aware of the dogma that's going on in an organization. So we've got to get people to remember what are those values and principles we need to remember and work with, as opposed to believing a single method is actually going to give you all the answers. All those agile methods are very, very similar. Under the covers, they all try to operate to those same values and principles. But if you try to just believe that a single method will give you all the greatness that you need, you're very wrong. So there's no one method to rule them all. I really, really don't like that when I enter an organization and they say, yep, we've chosen Scrum, we've chosen XP, we've chosen SAFe. You know, that's funny, isn't it? The agile methods are dangerous. Is SAFe safe? I don't know. But just choosing one method is not going to fix all your problems. You probably need to be able to pick from a few different things. I regularly find that an organization that mixes something like Scrum with XP and takes some scaling pieces from other areas is the way that they need to move. They need to progress like that. And also, each of those practices from each of those methods are going to be best applied in different contexts. So what is your context? How are you going to make it work for you? Is it the thing you really need to focus on at the moment? Or is another practice really going to give you the most benefit at this point in time? And obviously, some experience helps. I mentioned just attending a 2-day training course is not going to give you the experience you need to be able to make these things work. The application of the practice really does come from experience. I guess I would say that because I'd be saying get some experience like me to help you. But realistically, experience of doing it a number of times is the only way you're going to make a practice work. So let's move on to another quote. I don't know, do you know what RTFM means? So we've got some nods in here. The more Anglophile amongst you might get that. Read the fricking, polite version, manual. Yeah. So this is somebody who loves writing stuff down and just expects everybody to read it and just do it. It's a bit similar to the previous one, but JFDI is also another acronym. I'm not going to go through every single acronym, sorry. But the methodologists, you know, I must admit I was one at one time, and I learnt my ways the hard way. But getting stuff written down is important, but just then telling everybody to just do it is not going to work. So the methodologists, we need to deal with them. I like this analogy. We want a working method over comprehensive documentation. Yeah, so we want to see something that works as opposed to worrying about it and writing it all down and seeing if it works. I want to get it working first and maybe capture it then, because nobody reads a big method. I must admit, I say I was guilty in the past. Anybody heard of the thing called rational unified process? Oh dear, some people back there looking scared when I say things like that. RUP or RUP, it was really good in concept. The ideas behind it were fantastic, but it turned into a 2,000-page piece of work. You know, nobody was going to read all of that. So you just don't need to write everything down to that level of detail. And so making people just read that, it just doesn't work. So let's get something working. Let's start with something light that gives people a bit of direction and guidance as to what you're expecting them to do. And over time, hopefully, you'll be able to get the collaboration with the people doing it, feeding back to get it right for them. Nobody wants to be told what to do. Everybody likes to be able to say that it was their ideas and their way of working that they're now promoting to the rest of the organization so that they can feel that they were part of how that change has happened. I used to use a trick in kind of capturing what's good and bad about what's working in an organization. I think it's coming up in a moment. If you use tools like this kind of wiki kind of tooling, you know, you can't enforce and publish method on people. You need to be able to put it in an environment where people can contribute or criticize or even change what's been documented. And again, very light. Wiki tools are very good for that. I used to use a trick where I used to leave gaps in the documentation or gaps in the method description, or sometimes mistakes or things that are obviously wrong in there, because I really want a superbly excellent person to contribute to describing how we work. And I know that this is their area of expertise, and I know if I say something that they don't like, they'll feel compelled to come in and change and fix and add their knowledge. And so this really drags people into the conversation. Use that trick with caution, but it'd certainly be a way to get people engaged in what you're doing. So yes, let's get it light. Let's get it right through practice and learning, and let's make sure we capture it enough so people can understand what your success was and how they can do the same. So my next quote. Have we achieved our goal? Are we agile? You know, exactly. We just need to be agile. Obviously, that's the answer. The checklist. Yes, this is really, really difficult. Obviously, if people are going to invest in a transformation in their organization, they're going to want to know, have I got a good return for my investment? I want to know that we're getting better. How do I measure we're getting better? Well, measuring whether you're delivering software regularly would be a good measure, but unfortunately, people do get trapped in this checklist. An example behind me. So in this case, they're doing 15 minutes every day. Great. They've got somebody who went on a 2-day training course, so that's fantastic. Client's not to be seen, but don't worry about that. The team come together and they make a decision about what they might be able to do for the next 2 weeks. But they're not having retrospectives because they haven't got time. It's too busy to do that. But we've still got 60% agile. Fantastic. 3 out of 5 means we're 60% agile. Fantastic. We're doing really well. That is so wrong. It's just, please don't do that. Measures. Obviously, how you measure people will dictate how they behave. If you're just measuring them on doing things, like having the 15-minute meeting, they'll just do it. And if they're told that you're only allowed to be 15 minutes, they'll make sure they stop, even if they've not actually achieved what they're there for. So you've got to make sure you set some good targets. So we want to make sure that our capability of an effectiveness to deliver is the key thing that we're measuring. Equally, silver bullets, this idea of a silver bullet is a perfect solution that will fix everything that comes. They can also hurt as well. Because unfortunately, trying to measure things because you think they're agile may set the wrong behavior in people, as I've already mentioned. But also, silver bullets will actually expose the problems you have, and that may well hurt. One of the big challenges you get with Agile when you start to take it on board is, if it's done correctly, will expose a lot of what's going on today in your organization. And people might not like to see what you expose. It may well get very painful for them to realize how bad many of the things they are doing actually are. And so Agile isn't necessarily going to help fix it, but it will actually make sure everybody understands that problem exists, so you can now actually do something about it. It makes it very painfully transparent what's going on. So we've got to make sure, if we want to make real success, get value from our Agile adoption, we've got to get the collaboration going, the short feedback loops, and make sure that we adapt. The retrospectives down there, you cannot avoid those. We all know that just because you do something more and more doesn't ensure it will be the right thing to do. So we must make sure continuous improvement is part of the foundation. One of the key things I try to establish in an organization as quickly as possible is a foundation of continuous improvement. And by that, I mean just get everybody really committed to that retrospective process. Ensure that you get that working on a very regular basis at the team level, at the levels above those teams, and also try to establish a community of people who can run those sessions. Try to get some independence, some facilitation within those sessions that come from outside the team to ensure everybody in the team can still contribute and be managed and facilitated to get everybody's input. If you can now start to get multiple retrospective facilitators within an organization who can all make themselves available to each other, that can make a really big difference to improvement processes. Equally, that person can keep everybody honest as well. They can actually make sure they come back to that team and say, you all agreed you were going to change this. I'm not your manager, but I'm your conscience. I'm going to keep them back and basically say, come on, guys, I gave you an hour of my time to help you with this retrospective, and you've not done the action. Let's be honest about this. If you don't want to improve, this is the way to continue. If you want to improve, let's please take on what we said we should do. So that independent facilitation can really make a difference if you can set that up in your organization. Okay, let's move on to another quote. Some people are pretty set in their ways. I really have to be careful about using this word. So maybe let's avoid the A word. It can be a real swear word to some people. As soon as they hear it, that's it, they switch off. Not listening, can't hear, can't see anything, not listening. So why do we have to start with that word every time? We really want to achieve some benefits. We want to see in place some good principles. We want to see some people adopt some good practices. Do we have to label everything with this A word? So perhaps, maybe let's not use that. I often go into a meeting when I first meet a new client and we're talking about what we can do to help them. I don't use that word for a long time into the conversation before we maybe comes out as part of what we're discussing. So let's maybe avoid that. Let's because also they may think, well, unnecessary change, and basically, well, you're trying to force on me, and I've heard this thing, and it sounds really dangerous, and people have said that because of a lot of effort and work. Well, let's not set any wrong mindset from the start. Equally, too, you may want to avoid it because some people might think it's that you have the magic that can be brought into the organization too. Oh, Agile, excellent. Let's sprinkle some Agile fairy dust on our proposal or on our contract. Basically, put the word Agile on it, and it'll be wonderful. So we've got to make sure that fairy dust is that magic. It will be great, but just by saying the word doesn't change everything. So we've got to keep coming back to the conversation that starts out with, well, in your organization, do you find things challenging? Things not being delivered as well as you'd like them to be? Maybe it's taking a little bit longer. Maybe you've got too much in there, not enough of what you need. Maybe it's unpredictable. Well, that's the things that we want to work with you on. We want to help you achieve better predictability in your delivery and ensure that you get real value for your investment in these teams who are delivering your results. If you talk like that with any stakeholder, any money holder, it's going to resonate with them. They're going to actually think, oh, okay, well, maybe this is worth listening to. Go in there and say, hello, I'm Mr. Agile. I'm going to really help you because you're going to be Agile. You'd be straight out the door, gone. So, as I've said before, we've got to make sure that they get this focus on transparency. And I keep mentioning that word. And for me, it's so important to get operating effectively in an organization, because also, as I mentioned with the silver bullet, transparency in the wrong way can really create a lot of fear and uncertainty, and people can run scared from the fact that they're being now asked to be so transparent in what they do. I often get the pushback from people that I don't want to be transparent because people will now start micromanaging me more if they can really kind of constantly see everything I'm doing. And I try to push back on that and say, well, in reality, if you're being very transparent and everybody can see the value you are delivering every day, I believe they'll leave you alone. If they can see that you're doing a great job and that you're delivering results and that you're benefiting the company, they'll go and find somebody else to go and micromanage. This is something I don't need to pay attention to. This is great, good. I'll go somewhere else. I'll apply my micromanagement skills elsewhere. So let's just think that transparency should be a good thing if it's applied right and you get the culture right. So, okay, I might have talked about these people slightly already. Yes, Agile, that's a developer thing. Yes, I mean, those people down there do Agile. Me, I just continue as normal. No, sorry. It's everywhere. It changes everything. It changes everything from how the company thinks about its strategy. It changes everything about how the company runs its HR. It changes everything down to how you work with people who are delivering results on a regular basis, and of course the team themselves who are using those classic Agile practices too. So that middle manager can often be a big blocker to success for you in an organization where you're trying to manage change. So in this picture here, you see there's a blue layer. If you're in the northern countries, somewhere like Sweden, Norway, you get this thing called permafrost, this middle layer in the ground that remains frozen at all times. Down at the bottom of the organization, all of the teams delivering real results are right up for this change and really want to adopt these good practices. The executive, the CTO, the COO, they're like, oh yeah, they've heard the buzzwords, they read about it, we're at a conference, it's someone like me, talking about Agile, and they're really for it. But it's that middle layer, that permafrost layer, they're the really difficult part to work with. They've got to where they are, sometimes for the wrong reasons, but they've got to where they are and they know how to do their job, and they always want to stick to that because that's safe and comfortable for them. So they must be able to see that there's a need for change at all levels. We must be able to highlight to them the benefit of this. A good example, coming back to the micromanagement, is that so often I found that middle tier just spending their lives in Gantt charts a Microsoft project and just living their lives every day trying to have a perfect view of a Gantt chart into the long distance. That's hell. I can't imagine a worse job ever than having to constantly revisit their Gantt chart to make sure that it's a perfect critical path based on the fact that every developer today told them they can't do it in that time. Well, that's just crazy life. So if we can start to expose for them that, they don't need to do that anymore. They've got far better trend analysis and statistics coming from the team, real time, that gives them good evidence of what's truly going to happen. You don't have to do that rubbish anymore. You can actually change the work to being a good contributor, such as a servant leader to those teams. The person who gets rid of their problems for them, that makes them successful every day and removes their blockers for them. This has to be a good progression for people in those middle tiers. Equally, frees up their time from the doggedness of doing micromanagement and Gantt charting constantly. That just is no fun. So we've got to engage people at all levels. Sometimes it's really important to get people to understand some basics about Agile, and particularly if it's very new to them. So you do a lot of briefings, you do a lot of education kind of sessions, teaching about principles and practices. But it's very difficult typically to get that middle tier, that Permafrost, to attend a session like that. It's like giving up. You know, I'm going, oh, okay, I'll give up. I'm just going to hand myself over to the Agile guy. No, so often what I try to do is I say, whenever I meet any of those people, well, we've done all the training for the developers, you know, that we keep them really happy, but we're going to have a really special session just for you middle managers, you know. No, not going to allow any of the developers to come along. Only you are allowed to come to these special sessions. And we get them in the room, and we deliver the same session we gave to the developers anyway, but they don't know this. They think it's oh yeah, excellent. It's a special management session. But you've got to get people feeling it's something for them, that actually is going to work for them, and is really going to make a big difference. Of course, those people who are resistant to change are going to know why they should change. Success is one of the greatest ways of getting people confident this is going to be right for them. I try to use and find anybody from that middle tier who's been converted, has seen the light, and can actually talk of the stories of how this has benefited them, and bring them into those sessions. There's no point me talking as this external consultant being somebody that can truly believe if I don't have the context of their organization. It's not the same. So I try to find myself a pair from within the organization who's part of that community, who can come with me into those sessions and try to help communicate the context of what it will feel like for them when they get these benefits and they get this success. And this really helps build some rapport with the audience more than I can. You know, I may be an informed authority, supposedly, but then somebody with the same context should really help persuade them. So success breeds that interest and success for others. And as I mentioned earlier, this was like the silver bullet, exposing the elephant. The biggest challenge I find is that everybody's been resistant to see the elephant in the room. It's typical phrasing. It's ironic, there's a big elephant over that way somewhere. But when you get Agile working properly, you're going to basically make people realize that the things that they've been trying to avoid for so long really do now need to be fixed. And it will be very painful for people, the fact that you expose this and make sure that they're really aware of it. But it will be a very beneficial session, very beneficial experience for them if they're willing to accept there is a problem and we need to do something about it. And I talked a little bit about these briefings. Now, briefings are great for getting initial understanding and concepts across to an organization. But at some point, you need them to be able to continuously improve, which means they need to learn about new things that are going to help them with the challenges they now know exist. You know, there was a big elephant about the fact that nobody was doing any form of short-term feedback review of the code that had been developed, for example. So I often try to look at some of this education as being, rather than what's often called just-in-time training, I often like just too late training. The reason for this is, I'm sure you've all been in a training course or session, and you sat there going, I should understand why this is important, but I don't know why. I'm not quite sure what this means to me and why I should be interested to know this in a training session, because people want to tell you knowledge before you need it. If it's people have got started on their path to the use of Agile already, and they've suffered some challenges, and they're experiencing some problems, and then you provide them with a little bit of education that helps them understand how they might be able to address those things, they really want to take that knowledge. They really want that session, and it's a much more effective way. You know, there's a little bit of danger in there, but it's actually much more effective, and people get much greater value from that approach. Okay. So I'm back to the top of the chain. I've talked about that permafrost layer, but you still got these consultants around, and we made a decision to be agile, and we're investing all this money, and I'm impatient. I want results. Oh, come on, Julian. Just go and tell everybody to be agile, okay? Just go and tell them. Obviously, that's just not going to work. Again, it's like putting the agile pixie dust on the organization. It just doesn't change anything. So what do we have to do? There is no miracle grow. It just doesn't happen that fast. I don't know if anybody's read books like The Goal or The Phoenix Project. They are very accelerated change. Both books, incredible books. Please start with The Goal, because it's the old and the original book. Then move to The Phoenix Project, a modern translation. Both incredible books, but the change timeline is highly accelerated. I think it's a little unreal. They talk about 3, 6, 9 months for changing everything about how things are working in these organizations. It really does take a lot longer than that. You have to have patience. Obviously, if you're an investor, you do deserve to see that benefits are coming, and that you do need to be able to see that your investment is worthwhile. So those measures I talked about showing how long it's taking you to get something from idea to deploy, the timeline it takes to get a result of value from your software lifecycle is very important, and measuring that's a good thing to measure. But seeing that happen across your whole organization overnight is just not going to happen. There's no miracle. You have to put some intensive manual gardening into this, and you just can't sprinkle the miracle grow on everything, expect everything to grow so quickly. So how do you start that? I'm sure, again, some of this may sound common sense. For me, my current client, we've taken a single project. It's quite typical for the organization, and we've made sure that that one project becomes the foundation for how people should work in the organization in future. This one project has established, for the first time in an organization, a good CI/CD, DevOps-like environment. It's established the notion of having a clear vision and how to manage backlogs and how to actually constantly refine that backlog and choose the right amount of work and establish good velocities and understanding how teams should collaborate and how the organization needs to work with those teams, etc. But just for one project, because it takes such a change, cultural change, to manage that's as much bandwidth as you can give. But also you need some proof that this is worth doing for the future. Now that project team, everybody's watching them. They're being successful. We've had some problems along the way, you can imagine. But now that has become a thin slice of the organization, end to end, that can now grow. That CI/CD pipeline we've developed can now be reused and actually become an exemplar to the rest of the organization. The way we've worked with the business to establish our vision and to allow us to work with them constantly with our backlog is a new way of working that other people want to follow. So that thin slice is really powerful. But I mentioned here a thing called a futurespective. It's kind of a special retrospective kind of idea. And we did that with this project team right from the start. We said, you will know that today is not working. What is it that's holding you back? What is it that we would like to achieve? What is the goal? We choose to go to the moon. What do we want to achieve up there? And what is everything that we might find on our way that could stop us? We know you want to stop being held back. We know we want to go here, but what could block us on the way? Once we got that clearly identified, that gave my team that I'm in the opportunity to come up with plans and ways of working to try and remove those blockers, pull away those things that are holding people back, and keep people focused on that goal throughout. But again, for a small team, we can then take that whole set of knowledge and see if it applies to the organization later. Well, let's start small first. I keep my favorite word, transparency. Flow, though. Obviously, everybody knows about Kanban and making sure that we try to maximize flow and try to make sure we understand the blocks, impediments along the way. But let's make sure we kind of find that for this project team, because I can guarantee it'll be the same kind of blockers you'll find in the rest of the organization. If we can address them one place, it'll improve everywhere. Expertise may come from external people like myself. I would always try to encourage, though, that the organization, of course, develops its own capability, brings in its own permanent employees with skills and experience as well. But communities are really important too. When people start to do certain practices well and they really benefit from them, they can also maximize that benefit from talking to each other about how that success worked for them. And getting those communities of like-minded people together and facilitating their ability to work together is really important. Those communities really can change how people feel about their work. So there are one or two kind of people with test skills in the Scrum team, but maybe they want to be able to have a wider conversation with others with the same kind of skills in the rest of the organization. If you kind of facilitate that and allow that to happen, that can really build people's ability very quickly. I mentioned this earlier, the culture of retrospectives. It's worth bringing out again. There's no point in just keep believing that, was it Einstein's quote, insanity is defined by the belief that doing the same thing over and over again will eventually produce a different result. You know, just because it's a process you've got, doing it more isn't going to change the outcomes you get. And I did make reference to scaling frameworks earlier. Start small. Let's get these single teams right. But then you need to start thinking about the rest of the organization, how it feeds and supports those teams. You know, an agile team is only going to be as good as a set of work that it's being asked to do and the support it gets from the organization around them. The fact that people around them are always looking to how they can remove their obstacles. If you get that kind of mindset right, you can then really see these powerful teams at the core of your agile activity. There are lots of scaling frameworks out there. I already made fun over one thing, but you know, when you look at less disciplined agile, scaled agile framework, they're all really fantastic resources of knowledge, and so use them. But again, don't necessarily believe that one is going to fix all your problems. I tend to find that it's the mix that's the really good results. So, quick summary, and then I should have a few minutes for questions if anybody has one. So agile methods add a lot of value, and they can be made less dangerous if you know what you're trying to do with them and you have a plan about how you want to adopt them and use them in your transformation in your organization. There is always going to be a bit of that dogma, that religious belief that I went on the course and I'm now a converted member of a new community and all I have to do is just follow the recipe I was given and it will be successful. You do need to manage that and people reset some expectations. Equally too, anybody who believes that they can hand over their organization and how it works to somebody with 2 days training and believe that that's going to be a good idea, well, good luck with that. Placeholder for conversation, as I mentioned. Let's not try to get overly focused on big defined methods. Let's make sure that we get people the opportunity to put down some ideas about how to work. Let's try those things. Let's capture what works and share and grow that as a community. That's really important. Nobody wants to be told, to read the manual. Make sure you're very careful about how you measure people. Something I didn't talk about was some of the challenges of how people inside teams need to be measured in ways that encourage them to think that if my team is successful, I will be seen as successful. As opposed to some organizations' measures which say basically, well, I want your project to be successful, but at the end of the year, I'm only interested in how good you were. well, that's not going to help your team be a success because everybody's thinking about themselves, not the bigger picture. So we need to make sure that we measure people in the right way. Agile is not the objective. Neither should it be the way in which you try to convince people by beating them up with the A word constantly. It's not a hammer to beat people with. It's got to be something that people understand the method behind or the principles behind if you want them to be able to believe in what you're trying to do. Prepare the grounds. Well, there's going to be different levels where you need to be able to make sure people truly get what you're trying to achieve. That permafrost layer will need a lot of attention. They will need those special briefings. They will need that time to understand how their peers have really got benefit from this if you truly want them to go on the journey with you. And you are going to have to start small. It is not an overnight activity. Transformation like this takes months, if not years, for an organization. Focus where the biggest change is going to make the most value. Make sure you put in place all of that learning process to ensure that everybody can learn very quickly with feedback loops, not only in their work, but also their ways of working, and get the communities around that really wanting to grow it for you. You shouldn't need a cast of thousands of consultants like me. You should need a small core team that can facilitate how people make this change themselves.